evening, Miss Dodson. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. My job is just to check in on you. So this is our, I believe, third or fourth session so far, over the course of this little 8-week period that we're trying to aim for to make sure that you're all set before you go home, before you travel home to see family and things of that nature. I know the
hmm
last time we spoke, we talked about utilizing group sessions in order to connect with other individuals who are also grieving the loss of a family member and things of that nature to try to get you out of your shell a little bit more and connect with other individuals around you. How's that been working out for you? Or have you even attended any of the sessions that we had available in the office?
Yeah, I've actually attended quite a few. Um, at first, I'm kind of a little bit closed off, so it was a bit of me just sitting back and watching and observing and just listening. And I think like at the second meeting, I was more open to speaking because I felt like it was more of a safe space. Um, did I feel like I don't know if it felt good to talk to other people that I feel like understood where I was coming from. Um, so it felt good to open up. I don't know if that's the answer to everything, but I it definitely felt good to open up about certain things and feel like I was actually being heard.
Gotcha. So on a so on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being rated the lowest and 10 being rated the highest, how often, well, how frequent on that scale of 1 to 10 do you think that you would go back and experience that group session?
Mm, I would say an 8.
Gotcha. And how beneficial do you believe the techniques and things that were taught to you in that group session have been in order to help you flourish in relationships with your friends and your family outside of there?
I I think that more so than the techniques, it was just me being able to open up to them. Made me feel like I would be more comfortable opening up to my family. So I would say maybe like a 7.5. It made me a little bit more comfortable with talking about my feelings to other people, I guess, besides you.
Gotcha. And lastly, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to express some of the concerns that you had that you shared to the group to your family?
7.
Gotcha. Can you think of anything that we can do in order to make that more of a higher number to get you out of that shell in order to build those relationships back that you've lost over the period of this year?
I think that my biggest thing is working on how I say things because I want to get my point across, but I don't want to make the situation worse than what it is. I don't want to come off offensive or anything like that. So just, figuring out how I should approach these situations is probably the next step.
Gotcha, gotcha. I'm completely understanding. So when it comes to those therapy sessions, what have you learned in those sessions that you feel as if would be most useful to take back to your relationships with your family?
Um, I think the most useful things that I can take back to my family. Well, I think that it would be one of the most useful techniques that I can use, and it's so simple. It's just listening. And being able to understand how they feel and not invalidating their feelings while also, you know, being true to myself and how I feel in the midst of everything. Because I've learned that we're all going through grief. So how I feel is just how I feel, and everyone else is entitled to feel how they feel, and I can't be mad at that. So I think the most useful technique is for me to actually listen to them and understand where they're coming from.
Gotcha. And I've noticed that usually within our sessions, we talk a lot about your family, but we really never touch on your social life as much. So, how are the relationships going with your friends? Have you opened up a little bit more to them? Have you all communicated about problems that you had that you were kind of a little adamant on not communicating about previously? What's going on there?
I'm still not really open with my friends about the things that I feel. Um, I don't know why. I just don't feel comfortable discussing those things with them. But I've been trying to not be so closed off. I'm trying to get back in the norm of living my everyday life, including my friends in that. But I still haven't opened up about what I'm going through. And I don't really know when that's gonna happen, but I'm just not comfortable right now.
Gotcha. Looking at it from a different perspective, do you think that the problem lies within you not being able to be open and communicating with your friends, or possibly the individuals that you have as friends aren't individuals that you view as friends? So you're unable to open up to them in that sense. Because sometimes we can believe that certain people play certain roles in our lives, but in the reality of it, they don't. So do you think it's just you not being able to open up to them as friends? Or do you think that the friendship itself isn't significant enough for you?
Yeah. Savanja.
So do you think that's the case? Do you think maybe you kind of misplaced or misassigned the role of friends to that specific population of people and you don't view them as such, or that they are genuine friends to you, but you're just having trouble on your end keeping up your half of the friendship?
I think that I think that it's me that's having trouble. I really do view them as my friends. And I don't think it's that me that is that I'm not keeping up my half of the friendship because I'm there for them and things of that sort, but I just feel like such a bother. And they don't, and it's not even like they make me feel like I can't come to them. That's not it. I think it's just internal. Like I literally just I hate to be a burden on people. And I feel like if I just dump everything, I don't want to dump anything on anyone.
Mhm.
So I would at least want to get to a space where I've talked to my family at least before I like go to my friends and tell them all of this stuff. And I just don't want to dump all of that on them. I just feel like that's a bit inconsiderate. And I don't mind when I don't know because I just think it's a little bit inconsiderate.
Mhm. So I heard you say that you've been there for your friends throughout the course of going through the process of the loss of your mom. How often, or on a scale of 1 to 10, how often do you feel as if you've been there for your friends when they've had an issue or ran into like a problem or things of that nature?
Um well, since my mom has died, I've been there, but I don't think I've been as present. Um, I'm always a listening ear, but I think it's been a bit more of listening rather than giving any advice or anything like that to my friends when they have problems during this time. Because I have so much other stuff on my mind that it's kind of hard to try to steer someone else in the right direction when I don't even really know what to do for myself.
So one of the main points I just picked up on that you said is that you're usually present, but you don't have a lot to say. Um, One thing I've noticed throughout the course of our sessions is the fact that some clients don't recognize that support comes in all different shapes and forms. So you don't always have to verbally say anything in order to receive that support. So I know that you've stated that you really don't like to talk about your mom with your friends and things of that nature and open up and things about that. Do you feel as if the times where they have just physically been present for you, have been supportive towards you, and moving through your grief that you've had?
Yes, I do. Because I believe that I really don't want a pity party. I don't want it to always be just like, oh, we have to make sure that she's okay. I just want it to be the same. I want to feel normal when I'm with them. So I want to try to keep that aspect. And I think it's been working well of keeping just the happy, the friendly, just same girl talk instead of it being like I don't want to always reflect on that. Sometimes I just want to take my mind off of it.
Gotcha. So what I'm hearing you say is you're trying to get a sense of normalcy, and that's completely fine. But sometimes looking at it as a whole, we usually don't have that sense of normalcy because things aren't normal. And that's okay. In life, things change, things shift, and we have to pivot off of that and just take everything one day at a time and go through the present. So, urging that normalcy is completely natural and that's fine. But at one point or another, as individuals, we need to have a realization that everything isn't always going to be in the state that it is now. For example, it's like having a fruit tree. We know that oranges sprout on the trees usually around spring and summertime. But when it comes to winter and things of that nature, the oranges can die off. The tree can get a little limp, it doesn't produce as much life. But that doesn't mean that another season won't come around and it'll produce as much life as it did before. So usually everything goes in a cycle, and we have to learn how to pivot off of what we have then. So when summer and spring is over and it's kind of the fall and winter time and we don't have oranges, what do we have now? We have a completely different fruit. That doesn't take away from the value of the oranges. That doesn't say that the oranges aren't good for us or the oranges aren't good anymore. It just shows that we have something new in place of what we had previously. So there's always something new that can come forward later. So with that being said, um, one of my most trusted forms of therapy is usually a miracle question. So can you possibly imagine and discuss to me what a problem-free world would look like for you?
A problem-free world. Will that be with me changing the dynamic of what my family is now like, or with the fact that my mother is gone?
Let's take into consideration that your mom is no longer with us now, and you're going off of that. So for you to be happy, you to be happy, you to be thriving, you to be within yourself as you were before she left, what would that problem-free life look like for you? Who would be in it, and how would you navigate through it?
I would just want my family to be there. I would want us to be there for each other because I feel like through it all, that's what we really need is family. And if we were just able to grieve together and just get through this together, I think that it will make all the difference.
So let's act as if that's something that is happening within this present moment. What goals or what steps would you take in order to preserve that? What do you think you can do in order to preserve that?
That's a good question. Um, um, honestly, I really don't know what I would do because I think the biggest thing is being just open and being there for each other and not just like shutting down. Like if I can avoid shutting down, if they could avoid shutting down, I think that'll be the best way to preserve our relationships or the situation, just being open with one another.
Okay, so one of the bases of that question that I wanted to know is I wanted you to kind of use more of the I statements. So you said one thing that you would do is not shut down, but then you followed that up with saying it will also work if your family wasn't shutting down as well. Let's take into consideration that we're speaking from a person-centered point of view. So one thing I like to remind clients of is there are three things that we can't change. We cannot change time, we can't change what happened in the past, and we can't change the actions of others. So let's take into consideration, let's look at it from the point of view of your family did do that. So they weren't as mellow, they weren't as considerate and things of that nature. Let's think about the fact that you can only change and affect how you react to those things in order to keep that sense or that level of peace that you have there. So using I statements and trying to rear from the emotions or what ifs that other people could do, what could you do to ensure that that stays that way? Even if your family does go off the rails or you haven't talked to your friends in a while, things of that nature, what can you do for yourself to keep you within a positive space?
Um, so just to reiterate, it's just about me. So what would I do to keep myself in a positive space despite my family, despite my friends?
Despite any changes that they may have. And it can help a lot if you use more of I statements, because sometimes this can be a little bit challenging for others because we usually, as people, go off the emotions, thoughts, and feelings of us and everyone around us. So we talk about how everyone else's emotions or actions affect us instead of looking internally to receive a solution. Because even though another individual did what they did, it's something that's completely out of our control. So let's try to focus more on what we can control, which is ourselves.
Um, okay. I think like just the basics. Like I was just I would be more intentional
Mhm.
about not sulking or not spending every waking moment being sad or just getting up and doing things that genuinely makes me happy. Um, Instead of just coming home and just I guess sulking once again. I would just put more into myself, invest more into working on me mentally, physically, spiritually. I would just take more time to love on myself.
Gotcha. So with that, you just address the self-care notion of one thing we were trying to achieve within our therapy sessions. So I'm very glad that you had that breakthrough. When it comes to the response or attitude or perspective of your family and friends, speaking from a negative perspective, what could you do in that sense to make sure that you're still okay?
Can you say that again?
So, speaking from a perspective, for example, let's say that you did take everything that you learned into consideration and you applied it. And we end our counseling sessions and you're on a high. You're doing well. You're living your life to the fullest that you have. And let's say something happens within your relationship with your family and your friends, and it brings up some of the old feelings that you had about your mom and your relationships and things of that nature. When those feelings get drudged up, what would you do in that sense in order to remain the person that you have become and learned to love and become?
Um, I can imagine that at that point, if I had already found things to do positively to motivate myself, that I would just revert back to just doing those things or even just praying and going to God and just talking my feelings out. And even from the journaling aspect that you told me about at our last session, I would I would probably journal out my feelings because I found that it was very beneficial for me to just because most of the times I don't want to talk to anyone or I don't want to tell anyone anything. That sometimes if I just write out how I'm feeling, it feels like a release.
Sure, I'm really happy that you brought that up because that was coming to my next point. One thing that I really wanted you to do before our next session is utilize what you have in your journals. So I wanted you to take the time out and to write a very personal I based letter. So usually only using I words. So I feel, I think, I know, I've experienced type of phrases and letters that you would address to your sister, your father, and your friends. Usually speaking, it is a lot easier for us to have conversations with individuals when we wrote them down. Usually, when clients are confronting hard situations and things of that nature and they don't write it down beforehand, you can have somewhat of a little brain malfunction and you can think you said everything you needed to say. And then once you walk away, it's like, dang, I should have said this, or I could have said this in a different way, or I could have said this because it was a little less hurtful, or I could have been a little bit more aggressive when I felt this way. So, one thing that I feel as if would be very beneficial to you really cleansing yourself and going through that last phase of self care in order to focus on you and what you need at this moment in order to navigate through the back end of your grief and kind of pull yourself out of it is to write those letters addressed to those individuals, explaining only how you feel and only the reaction that you had so they can understand from your perspective. Because with ideas of grief or the ideas of support, like with the friend group, it can be kind of hard trying to read a person, trying to understand the needs of a person, because there's so much of a cloud of judgment that goes over each individual based upon what they feel as if they need at that moment, because everybody is grieving something. Your father is grieving the loss of his wife. Your sister is grieving the loss of her mother. Your friends are even grieving the loss of their friend, which is you, because you're not the same person anymore. So everyone is taking on a form of grief right now based off of this one loss. And there's no specific definition of how everyone is progressing within fixing themselves or putting themselves back together, or how they're putting the pieces back together. And the only thing that can really help us in the long run is the support of others. But you can't receive support from others if you don't know what you want that support to look like. We can't fix those relationships unless you know what needs to be said and how you want to fix the relationship.
I I don't know, that's a lot to think about. And I never thought of it from that perspective, that even like more so with my friends that they lost someone too. So I'm definitely gonna take that into account moving forward.
Just so, do you think utilizing that journaling technique and writing those letters is something that you can do before our last and final closeout session in 2 weeks?
And definitely so.
Gotcha. Is there anything else that you would like to talk about?
No, this section actually gave me a lot to reflect on. So I think that I think I've gotten a lot out of this.
Sure. I can see we're leaving the session on a good mellow note. But just as I stated in our first session, I am a mandated reporter, so I am required to ask, um, are you thinking about hurting yourself or others?
No,
Do you feel homicidal or suicidal?
I don't.
Is there anything that you know that affects the health of anybody who is handicapped, elderly, or a child that needs to be reported?
No,
And is there anything else that I can do for you today in our session?
no. I thank you so much once again, as always.
No problem. I really appreciate it. And that last and final closeout session with your exit counseling and your booklets and techniques that we've used in order for you to take with you are going to be at the front. Just remember to try to use some of those mindful techniques we talked about throughout this little course, especially when you're going through the process of writing those letters. Those mindfulness techniques will very much so center you, especially when you're feeling stressed, because during the process of those letters, you can become very emotional and things of that nature. So just make sure you're utilizing all of your techniques of self-care in order to get the best cleanse you can of how you feel.
Okay, I will.
Asha, thank you for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.